I think you've heard me talk about it, and you and I have talked about it. I have no antipathy for religion, right? I think we have a problem, which is that our religions, because they are the product of evolution, are not a good match for a world in which everything is novel. But from the perspective of what these things are, they are the key that allowed our ancestors to get us to the present, right? These things that allowed people to collaborate in these large lineages, right, are the key to our success. But we have come to a point at which we now have a bunch of religions that are incompatible, that, we can pretend they all say the same thing, but they don't. They say some similar things, which is not surprising. There's effectively convergent evolution that has shaped many of the beliefs. But in essence, I think, and this is the bitter pill when I talk to people who come from the religious side of this discussion, is that I think if we are to live up to the ideals that are contained in the religions that you're describing, that we actually have to recognize mechanistically what these things are and say, all right, how do we do that over all of humanity? And, maybe Buddhism gets us there, maybe, or at least versions of Buddhism have this sort of highest level of enlightenment in which we not only view our own religious perspective as viable, but we recognize the unity of others. But I don't think, I basically think, Jonathan, that if we do not recognize the underlying evolutionary explanation for the nature of these belief systems and then abstract it so that we can have one for the entire human lineage, that we will destroy ourselves as a result of the failure of groups to durably cohere.
Right. So let's say, even only as an evolutionist, let's say would you apply that to any other level of reality? A single coherent pattern. Like you don't think that there's a need for diversity, that there's a need for,
I didn't say that.
That if you create single patterns that, let's say, encompass all, then you're creating fragility.
No. First of all, it may be, again, you start out with the cartoon level, right? So I've described that we need some sort of abstraction of all of the religious principles that can cover all of humanity. And yes, that could be some homogenization process in which we all become one not very interesting thing, which is obviously not the world I want to see. But it could be that...
there are some movements in that direction, by the way. Like in these world structures that people are trying to set up, there is a strange flavor for a kind of homogeneity, a weird universal homogeneity.
Well, look, let me steel man it for a second. Right. I don't want it, right? I'm somebody who the best parts of me were informed by travel to really far-flung places and the connection with people who had a very different experience than mine. So believe me, I do not want to see the world made homogeneous because I think it will be a tragic loss. There's an argument, though, that we have to do some of that. In other words, what if we understood that the key to reaching an agreement that allows our descendants to be here 1,000 years from now is that we must have a shared language, right? Now, I know there are obviously, there's Esperanto and people have made arguments along these lines before, but I wonder if it isn't true that we actually cannot afford the loss of meaning between languages like, Russian, Chinese, English, Portuguese, Spanish, that as we try to explain our position, we get a loss of resolution as we move between these languages, and that we can no longer afford it. That, with the level of firepower we have, the level of integration of our systems, we just simply put ourselves in existential danger by allowing that to persist, which doesn't mean anybody needs to stop speaking any of those languages, but it might mean that we need to prioritize getting a common language for all of us.
So let me give you, because you seem to think that the religions haven't thought of this, or it's not part of their structure, but in Christianity and in Islam and in some ways in Judaism, and I think in other traditions as well, there's something which we call eschatological reality. That is, there is an image of an end point, or an image of a point where all is together, all is revealed. And that has a structure. It's not arbitrary. There's a way in which it's represented. And it's represented as usually as a mountain or a natural place, which is surrounded by a technical place. So the New Jerusalem, for example, in Revelation, is described as a tree with water surrounded by a wall that is made of stones and that is technical. And that it says that the glories of all the nations are carried into the city, right? And this is what you're describing. So it doesn't mean that the nation ceased to exist, but it means that the best of all is carried into unity. And that this is how unity exists. Unity exists through unity doesn't destroy the levels. This is what true unity doesn't do. It doesn't suck in all the levels of reality into it. It tends to exist like a traditional world works with the existence of families, communities, villages, the king, the pope, right? All of these coexist. They don't have to obliterate each other as they're manifesting themselves at the different levels. So I think that this image is there. It's there, but it's there in understanding that there's a manner in which it cannot be attained in the world, and that trying to attain it creates another image, which is something like the Tower of Babel, which is a very fragile, universal structure that tries to be all encompassing. A good example of that is all these projects of digital identity that we're seeing, like these types of centralization of identity of all your elements into one giant world system, is something which has been definitely warned about in Christianity. We talk about the number of the beast, or the 666, all these things that people think are weird and just arbitrary, but they're not at all. They're really talking about the difference between a normal existence of all these levels of reality coexisting together, and one which is this one system that tries to, let's say, permeate all aspects of reality and tries to colonize all the elements which are below it. And so there is a vision for that. It's just that people don't struggle to think imagistically, and so because of it, they don't see that it's there, but it's definitely described in the Bible itself.